Good afternoon. Thank you for joining hashtag No Limits. I appreciate you all joining me today. Hashtag No Limits is a program in which I interview people that society has placed limits upon, but who have busted through those limits. Ophelia says in Hamlet, "We know who we are, but not who we will be." And I believe that to be 100% true, and that there is no better example than the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. The caterpillar literally dissolves into its cells and then it reforms into the butterfly. As if that's not difficult enough, then it has to struggle to get out of the cocoon in order for its wings to be strong enough to fly. That is no easy task, but neither is busting through the limits that society places upon people. And not only do I interview those who have had limits placed upon them, but I interview those who help those bust through those limits. And so today, that's the person that we have with us, Michelle Vazquez. I've not met her in person, but I'm really hoping to in just a couple of weeks. No, you're not coming? Oh,
No,
okay. All
no.
right. So Michelle is
Yeah.
another, for those of you who have watched me in the past, you know that I'm a Master IEP Coach. Michelle is also a Master IEP Coach, and that's how I've been introduced to her. But as far as getting to know her, we're going to do this together. So Michelle, thank you for joining me today, and tell everybody, myself included, a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Vasquez. I'm super excited to be here. And thank you so much, Shelley, for just giving me the opportunity to,
Absolutely.
just be on here and share, about myself and everything else. But just to let you know, I actually, yes, just like what Shelley said, I am a master IEP coach. I remember seeing her on there with the group coaching, and the community is amazing. And I have learned so much being in there, just going to the trainings. And Shelley is awesome and so knowledgeable. And I
Oh,
definitely
thank you.
look up to you, Shelley, for sure. Um, I actually am currently I'm a resource specialist teacher. So I teach students with special needs or with an IEP in the general education classroom. So we do like a pull out and push in model right now. So we do half and half. I previously was a special education teacher in the special day class for 10 years. So that I will be starting my 14th year of teaching. I so
Wow. Kudos to you, especially some of those years being during the pandemic.
exactly. Yes, yes, definitely a learning opportunity for sure. And I am a mother. I'm a wife to two active, very active little boys. They're 4 and 6 years old. And yeah, so I'm loving every minute of it, especially around this age. It's like,
Yeah.
okay,
Oh,
I
yeah, I bet.
yeah, like I know how to be with kids that are like kindergarten age and up, the top age was hard, but they're so much fun, and definitely gives me a whole reason, to do what I do and even more. So yeah, so
Yeah.
that's me in a nutshell.
So you mentioned that you're a special education teacher. That's what brought me to the Master IEP Coach mentorship. My child does not have any sort of disabilities that required an IEP. Do either of your children at this point have anything that requires an IEP?
No, my own
Okay.
children, Shelley.
Yes. Yes.
No, not at the
Okay.
moment. Yeah.
It's the reason I ask is because I started the mentorship several years ago, and it was pretty new. I think I was in maybe Catherine's third mentorship class, and at that time there was myself and maybe two or three other teachers in the program, and then I was narrowed down to even more of those that were teachers also had children with a special need, and I didn't have that. And so I was quite an anomaly in the group. And so it's interesting to hear now that there are more and more special education teachers and gen ed teachers too going into the mentorship, even without having their own children that they have the big interest in, like, you and I have it in the special education world. So I'm glad to hear that there are more teachers going into it, because I think there's such diversity and such a need for everybody to have a better understanding of
Hmm.
the special education process and the possibilities. I felt like I had a great understanding being a former special education teacher,
Right.
like I'm sure you did too. but then when you get in there and Catherine really opens up to, you could do this and you can do this and you can do this because, the law says this, but this is the minimum, and so I have learned so much from her, even within the special education world, that I thought I wouldn't need coming from the special education world.
Exactly, because
So,
we've been doing it for so long. We
right.
just, we've been exposed to so much, but definitely getting into the program definitely opened my eyes. But actually, Shelley, I wanted to back that up too. The main reason why I don't actually have children with special needs, but I actually do have a foster sister that,
Oh,
yes, who has special needs. And
okay.
yeah, she's been with us for 26 years, she is definitely the reason why I became a special education teacher. So,
Ah, okay.
yes, so we have to have some type of background, right? Why we even got in, get into it or
Yeah.
have that story behind it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. We all have that story. I had Heather Cachapo on a few weeks ago, and she is kind of the same way. She had a friend who had a sibling that had special needs, and so she knew from little on, because of working with her friend's sibling, that she really wanted to go into this field. So yeah, we all have our own stories of what brought us into special education, but that's not really why we're here today. So as I advertised, and as you and I chatted a little bit about what we were going to talk about today, you first mentioned that talking about the growing up around different people's cultures and backgrounds and how helpful that has been to you. So let's talk about that some first.
yeah. If I can take it all the way back,
Sure.
so if that's okay, I'll try not to ramble on too much. But to take it all the way back, I was born and raised in Hawaii, in a small town called Kalihi, and definitely will always be home in my heart. And being born there is a huge stirring pot of so many different cultures, right? Just
Mhm.
being there, the school that I went to consistently persisted of people who were Filipino, like myself,
Okay.
grew up in Hawaii, or were islanders, which consisted of Samoans, Tongans, Fijians, people of that just knew, and everybody just had the same culture. And so
Right.
just growing up there, and that's all I really knew up until I was like about the sixth grade.
Hmm.
My mom and my parents actually separated, and my mother brought my brother and myself to all the way from Hawaii all the way to Portland, Oregon.
Oh, wow.
Yes, completely opposite of, you know, I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, well,
Tropical to snow and rain and all kinds of yucky weather year round.
definitely. That's why I'm here in California now. So I miss the sun. I miss the sun. But yeah, so just growing up in Hawaii, and then just knowing everybody just pretty much looked the same as me, and not knowing any difference, I would be exposed, to people of other nationalities that we don't really see in my school every now and then, but not all the time. So going from that to Portland, Oregon, we moved. I remember the first day of my seventh grade year in middle school, I walked in as I was like the only other brown girl in the classroom, with a room
Okay.
full of Caucasian people
Right.
there, students and classmates. And with the exception of how I think there was a one of my classmates was mixed. So she was half African American, half white. And I remember as soon as I walked into that classroom, it was like all eyes on me. It was
Yeah.
like, who is this girl? She looks different, and it was very scary. And I walked in, my teacher was amazing. I still think about her that day because I remember the first activities that she had that day. And not until I became a teacher, now I understood what she was doing, right? And so she actually had an activity for the whole class, the map of the island I'm from, which is Oahu. She had a map on there, kind of like where, like locations, and kind of like a crossword puzzle where we think. And I was just like, hey, I know this stuff. And it was, it was awesome. Like now I'm like, wow, I'm so glad she did that. I still remember that to this day.
Yeah. That's
Just
incredible.
yeah, just to get the conversation going, having people, get to know me and ask me questions, right? It was awesome. But
Yeah.
Shelley, I got to
So
tell you.
I'm gonna stop you there for just a second, because what a great example of including somebody. And
Yes,
I mean, not tech. I mean, I suppose technically it was inclusion, but it's to me really, it's just like, okay, this is what Michelle brings with her when she comes. It's different than what most of you are familiar with, and so let's educate you. Let's make her feel comfortable because we're going to do something that she's familiar with, and at the same time, we're educating everybody else. And to do it in such a way that you, as the student, didn't even clue into it. And
correct.
I sometimes think that's where teachers are worried that, oh, well, the student's going to still know that they're different because, it's just going to be really obvious. And yes, you know, new kid in middle school, I'll be honest, if you're a new student in a district at middle school, all eyes are probably going to be on you anyway. But to add to that, the fact that, as you said, you're from a different background than everybody. Your skin is a different color than most everybody in the room, and so yeah, it was like, oh, okay. But what an awesome teacher! That's
Right?
just, I mean, kudos to that teacher, because that's what
Yeah,
we need now for our kiddos with disability. What's not even just for our kiddos with disabilities; it's for everybody.
correct. And I still remember her name, Shelley, Mrs. Howell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mrs.
And
Howell.
that's the
So,
teachers that you remember, the really awesome ones and then the really not awesome ones.
yeah. Yeah, and then also she did her homework. She
Right.
she knew I was coming. She knew my background. So just being prepared into knowing what
Yeah.
to do right away was awesome. Just yeah, definitely as a teacher now I really appreciate it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was
Sorry.
awesome.
So I interrupted, but that was just like, oh my gosh, that's such an awesome moment to talk about. And how, I mean, yeah, like you said, she did some investigating and some, preparation. It probably didn't take her as much time as many people would think, you know.
Correct.
Well, I don't know, maybe I'm not sure how old you are, but maybe there wasn't Google and maybe she couldn't automatically just pull this stuff up. But I mean, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, but how wonderful that 1 or 2 hours that she invested in you prior to you getting there was received, and how it helped set the tone for your future in that town and in that school district.
Exactly. Exactly. And it was great. So yeah, really appreciate her. Very thankful for her. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, after that I actually my experience in middle school was actually very beneficial. Instead of people, well, I did have some questions though, I have to tell you, though, Shelley. Just
Sure.
coming from Hawaii and people not knowing the background. But the questions that the kids were asking me were kind of like, wow, I'm so glad I'm here for you guys to learn. Because they would ask me, what kind of money do you guys use in Hawaii? Do you guys use shells?
Wow. Oh my goodness. But you know what? Again, I mean, it's a little frightening that by seventh grade they didn't know that. But at the same time, I'm glad they felt they could ask you. And
Yes.
again, that speaks to that inclusion and inclusiveness, that if we just, I sometimes think we're scared to let gen ed kids ask special ed students the questions because we're afraid it's going to offend them or hurt their feelings. But I think when you are open and honest, and you honestly have a real honest question, then I mean, things can just blossom and flourish. And they might have been, like, really, this is real question. I get that, but at the same time, it educated both of you, in different ways, of course. But yeah,
Yeah. And it gave him the okay to, that little activity gave him the okay to ask questions and everything like that. And throughout that whole year, I just remember people would just be very comfortable with asking me. And, I I was pretty, I'm still pretty friendly, but I was friendly and would answer their questions and everything. So yeah, but my middle school experience was interesting. Of course, whose middle school experience is not, but,
right.
but I was very lucky. They welcomed me with open arms, even though I was different, and which led me to be more. I feel led me to be more open and more talkative Because believe it or not, when I was in Hawaii, probably up until I was 12, I was extremely shy. Believe it or not talk that much. Now you can't stop me. Um, so it really opened me up just because I had the opportunity to, I was somebody new and everybody was asking questions. So it was really good. And then after going into high school opened up even more, right? I saw people of different colors just like me, even more being exposed to them. And I was just like, okay, I'm getting a little bit more comfortable, and I just, in high school, even though there was people of different colors there, as soon as you walk into the lunch area, everybody was still segregated, right? Like you would have, right, the Latinos on one side, and then the Caucasian people, and you'd have African Americans on this side. And but what I loved, Shelley, is that my friends, we called it the multicultural table, somewhere in the middle. And it was, kids of all the of different colors. And my best friends, all of us are my best friends. We still share the picture with each other today. I'm Filipino, my friend is Chinese, my other friend is Caucasian, and my best friend is African American. And that consisted of my group of my people that I always just hung out
Yeah.
with. And but also I did meet more people of the same culture as myself, but came from Philippines, and I actually was shunned away because I didn't know the language.
Ah,
I didn't speak
yeah.
it.
I've heard of stories like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it was hard because people in Hawaii, they were more like me. They didn't really know the language because their ancestors have been in Hawaii for so long that, technically the language does go away, right? Because you're so
Yeah.
immersed within the culture of
Sure.
Hawaii, that's what I learned and grew up. So when I came to Portland and then, meeting people that were the same ethnicity as me, I was just like taken back that they, yeah, didn't take me in, as fully. So
Right.
which is why it was great that I still had the multicultural table, that it wasn't just me. There's other people in my school that had that experience too. So yeah. So that was my
Oh,
high school.
that is awesome. I mean, you definitely come from a much more diverse background than I do. I've grown up in the Midwest. I've stayed in the Midwest. It was only after I met and married my husband that I really ventured anywhere. And now I can list, like 20 something countries that I've visited and, lots of different states and things. But so what sort of things did you learn from having your multicultural table friends that you think are really helpful to you today in what you do in teaching and as being a master IEP coach?
Yeah. That, Shelley. And then also in college, I actually majored in deaf studies for sign language.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's another thing too, that I forgot to mention. And because I was just so interested and so into the language that I love so much, and also being a part of a singing gospel group that,
Mm.
yeah, and just being immersed with all the types of music and everything, and that just being exposed to Earth, Wind, and Fire, and all the things, like I have to name it. I have to name the show, and that, and then also finally being hired on as a special education teacher in a low socioeconomic Latino community, and being at my first school, which I call family, for 7 years. They were amazing, and just having friends with Latino background. And then I end up marrying a Mexican man. And so that's a little bit more of like, even after high school, it still continued. And um, so, yeah. And so, how I feel just having all of this background and knowledge definitely has helped me as a teacher, for sure. Connecting with my parents, I think, has been
Mm.
the number one thing with that. I With the schools that I've worked at, I've always had parents that only spoke Spanish only speaking parents.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember having, and I was doing it for 4 years already. If there's a will, there's a way, Shelley.
Hmm.
we will communicate, we will do what we need to do.
Right.
Because
Right.
right, the end goal is their child and make sure that their child's successful. And I remember thinking about a certain story. I had a parent assuming that I was prejudiced against her because she didn't speak English.
Oh.
Yes, and actually went to my admin and complained about me. And I was just like, "What?" I was shocked. And at the time, my admin was very supportive, and I, let her know. I was like, that's not me. I've been doing this for, at the time, at least 4 years, and I've had
Hmm.
many parents coming in and out. Shelley, by the end of that year, me and that parent ended up being like friends on social media.
I've heard a lot of stories that way too, where you start off animosity and then, once that confusion and assumptions all get just, straightened out, and that, yeah, it usually becomes a beautiful friendship in the end.
Definitely, definitely. And it's being a special day class teacher, and Shelley, we have our kids for more than 2+ years, you
Right.
know, and I had the student at least for 2 years, I think, but then she still remained in the school since she was with me since I think second grade. So we still had that connection. And yeah, so definitely just being open, being more empathetic towards parents that just came here or
Yeah.
are they're uncomfortable with the English language, making sure that I think the number one thing is just making sure that they're also included with parent conferences, making sure that there's a interpreter there or trying to figure out um, all the announcements and everything is translated into their language. I think is so
Right.
important. Yeah,
Yeah, and I
and I
and I
think
have a feeling that's something that gets overlooked frequently, especially again, as I said, where I'm from, most everybody here is Caucasian, and there are some other ethnicities, but I would say probably 90% or higher is Caucasian in my area. And so when someone does move in and they speak a different language, it's a little bit easier because it's just one language and it's usually Spanish. But in a bigger district where you have dozens of different languages, especially with regards to the IEP, that is part of the law that it is supposed to have, be in the native language or the language that's best understood as much as possible. And so, I don't know that a lot of people are aware of that, and especially the people who need it. I don't think they are aware that that is a service that is provided to them if their child is receiving special education.
yes,
Um,
agreed. And I think the most difficult part, Shelley, is the languages that are non-Spanish. Because I had a
mhm,
student that was Chinese, and I think his dad spoke Mandarin, and just to we had to go to the special ed department of our school district and make sure that we had an interpreter and everything. But that's difficult to even
mhm.
get right, and I
Yeah,
just yeah, and as much as we can. Good thing we have apps on our phone that can do translation
right.
because that is
Yeah,
how I survived struggling with my parents. And
yeah.
these apps are amazing with every single language in the whole world just to speak to somebody. So that's how me and this parent communicated as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I had in my entire teaching career, I only had one student that the parent spoke anything other than English, and it was Spanish. And thankfully, there was a Spanish teacher who taught Spanish in my school district, but she really didn't. I mean, it was a junior high level Spanish class, so she really didn't do a lot of the communication. And so I did. I mean, this was before cell phones were super prevalent, and we had all these apps, but I would Google Translate to try, when I would write my notes back and forth, I would write it in English and then I would translate it so that if mom could maybe pick some of it out of the English but wasn't quite sure, she could look at the Spanish, or vice versa, because some things don't always, I found, don't always translate
Exactly.
evenly,
Mhm.
or exactly is maybe a better word. And yeah, so I can imagine that is very difficult, like I said, in the larger district with all the different potential languages that you could need or need to translate. And yeah, the announcements, the finding out all of that information has to be really, really tough. So I'm glad to hear that you found apps to overcome some of those limitations. What was your sort of percentages of different ethnicities that you worked with?
Um, my first and third school, their percentages were pretty high with Latino community. It was like 97%.
Okay.
It was great. Yes, yes. So a lot of Spanish speakers, and then some African Americans, and some African Americans would be next, and then some Asian, but it was really rare. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So how did that, or did that direct the needs? Like were the needs very different, or were they very similar across all the ethnicities that you've worked with? Or like what did you find the most interesting and the most difficult?
yeah, that's a good question. Definitely getting Spanish translators were so much easier,
Hmm.
and is easier currently. We also do have parents. I do have a parent that is deaf, and that is deaf as well, and that isn't too difficult also. But definitely like something other than that, like we would have people from the Middle East and Asian. Those were more difficult to make sure that we get at least an interpreter. But the communication was definitely harder, and I just feel for those parents, and just trying
Yeah.
my best, and trying to contact the special ed department, kind of like, okay, what do I do, and I'm very happy. My current special ed department, they're very good with making sure that they get it done.
Yeah, something that I've heard multiple times, and I've not experienced it because, as I said, I'm very boring in where I live as far as different ethnicities. Um, did you find that the people that you had in your classrooms truly should be there? Or what I've heard oftentimes is when there's a language difference, that because of our testing, a lot of people who speak something other than English end up in special education, even though they probably really shouldn't be there.
Yeah, Shelley, I've heard stories too, and I think I volunteered or just went to observe a classroom too, and they would tell me certain students were like, do not belong here. Another Spanish, yeah, just came from another country that didn't belong there. My experience in my own classrooms, I haven't experienced that. Yeah, I haven't experienced that. I majority of the time it's like, no, they do belong with me in the special day class for sure. But yeah, I've
Yeah.
heard of stories, and it's just unfortunate. I will say, what I like about the testing that we do before having the student come into the special ed program is that I know with my speech and language pathologist, she makes sure that we have a Spanish translator there to do the speech and language testing in Spanish, also to make sure that all of her grounds are covered. And
Good.
I love that. I love that. And then
Yeah.
same thing with our psychologists. I know they have that provided as well if they feel the need to. So
Yeah. So is it okay if I kind of shift gears a little bit?
yes.
So tell us about your foster sister, because you said that she's one of the main reasons that you went into special education.
You're gonna make me cry, Shelley. Sorry.
Sorry, that was not my intention.
Yeah. She is, I can't believe I'm crying on live.
It's okay. It just shows how passionate and how much you love her.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Um, she came into our lives when I was 12. My mom opened up her own business of taking care of adults with special needs. And
Wow.
yes, yes. So we've had two clients, and one of them was my foster sister. And she has autism, multiple disabilities. She's nonverbal. and Down syndrome. Yeah, she has Down syndrome. And so she was with us, I think, when she was early 20s. She's been with my mother for more than 20 years, 20 plus
Wow.
years. Yes. Her own biological mother is very much in the picture, and she comes to visit her as much as she can. You know, and with Leanne, my foster sister, she has her behavior issues were pretty high back when she first came with us.
Hmm.
So it was a learning experience for sure. My poor brother, when we were younger, he was only 8 at the time. She would chase him around the house. You know, he was scared. He was just scared because he was short at the time. Now he's like 6'2" and like can charge her if he wants to, you know. But
Yeah.
it's so you take on so much more empathy, I think, Shelley, growing up with somebody with special needs. And sorry.
It's
Yeah.
okay. Take
So
your time.
yeah, just growing up with somebody with special needs, and she has taught me so much still to this day. Yeah. So
So,
go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, so tell me some of the things that she has taught you. And we got a comment from Janine. I'm guessing this is potentially somebody that you know,
Yeah, it's
maybe.
my cousin,
Okay.
so she knows. Yeah, yes, everybody knows who she is, and she is stuck to my mother like glue. That is my mother's baby. She like sometimes me and my brother question like, "Mommy, like her better than us."
That's okay. My daughter
Definitely
used to
is.
say that about my students all the time. She's like, I am your child, not them.
Yes,
Like, because I would always
right.
refer to them as my kids.
Exactly. We still do that, right, Shelley?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Isn't yeah, you have to. Yeah. The things that she's taught me, well, behavior wise, she would chase us around the house. Would she would throw, things um towards us or towards family members, objects, um become physical, at times, a lot of the times actually. And we just learned how to cope and and I think she just kind of knew. She knew that we're her brother and sister, and my mom is technically, her foster mom. That's her mother. And she just learned that there were boundaries as she's gotten older, right? And now she's, I think, I want to say 48,
Okay.
Shelley. So she's been we grew up with her, and it was awesome, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Yeah.
That's wonderful to hear. And to know that those, I think that could potentially give hope to a lot of people, just in the sense that she was already in her early 20s when you all came into her life, and that even though it could have seemed very um, depressing or lost cause or very, I'm not even really sure, I'm troubling with grasping the right words here, but to know that she is a successful grown up now, and that, the right interventions, the right steps being taken. I don't, just a different approach to maybe a parenting style. I don't want to discount her biological mom at all, and saying that, oh, the right people came in. I don't want to say that. But different people to come along and help support in that situation. And that hope of, okay, yeah, still in the early 20s, it was still pretty tough.
Right.
But now that she's, 40-ish, almost 50-ish, she's so much different than she was, and things are much more manageable and much more under control, and sounds like she does have a much better sense of herself and everything that is going on around her and how to interact with those two issues.
Mhm. Exactly, for sure. And even just growing up with her, and it, just knowing, I was going to say, sorry, that I actually went into sign language because of her too, because that was one communication style that I know they used when she was in high school to see, just to have her communicate with us. Because
Right.
that still to this day is the hardest thing. I know my mother tells me all the time, it's hard to know, if she's hurting or in pain, because,
Right.
oh, yeah, but definitely using a lot of visuals. And then she does know some signs, definitely. So that is definitely the most difficult thing, is communication with her. So
Yeah, and 20 plus years ago, when she first came into your family, there weren't really communication devices. And so, sign language or the PECS system or some other sort of system like PECS, which is the picture exchange communication system, it's just a bunch of little symbols, and then you learn what the symbols mean, and then you use those symbols to express what you're trying to say. Um, that was, the only things really for communication at that time. So she is using a communication device now, or she still uses more sign language, or what is her main mode of communication now?
it's more of sign language, the gesturing.
Hmm.
She does use the PEC system. When I was living with my mother at the time, she does use that, and there's pictures and visuals and symbols,
Hmm.
that she would use to see what she really needs also. So
Yeah, that's cool. So you have had a very diverse background, growing up with someone with special needs, and then growing up with all the different ethnicities that you have been around, and yourself moving from Hawaii to the mainland and up to Oregon, which I'm sure was massive culture shock.
definitely, sure.
Yeah. So what were the benefits to? I mean, we've kind of talked about them a little bit, but what were some other benefits, and even what were some of the negatives about growing up with all the different cultures and peoples and backgrounds?
The benefits for sure, is being more empathetic to people of different cultures, or that do not know the certain languages. I've talked about that previously. um, I think Shelley, I'm very fortunate that my family in itself, I have a really close knit family with not just myself, but see, you see my cousin on here, and we're a
Yeah.
very close knit family, extended family as well, where, and I think it's part of our Hawaiian culture, is that we accepted anybody that came to our home, and we would throw these big parties at my cousin's home, and we would just accept everybody. Oh, come on in, and like, eat this food. My auntie wouldn't take no for an answer. You know? and and it was great growing up and having people like to come over and be
Hmm.
uncles and everything. And it was my friends of different cultures coming in, like, oh, we love coming to your house because you guys always feed us, and right, and just
That's always one way to make teenagers happy, is feed them.
yes, all my friends knew that back in the day. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, it was great. And definitely just learning them, just welcoming into our culture, and then us vice versa, learning about theirs as well. And yeah, so that was definitely beneficial. And also bring it back to when I did go to college. It wasn't until I went to college I was involved in a Filipino Americans Association, student association back then, and I really found a huge love for my own culture. I was very
Oh,
involved.
nice.
Yes, I was involved in a huge production every year. They would, it's called the Filipino Cultural Night, and I was very involved with. They made us learn the cultural dances, um, and be part of the skits and everything like that, how it was like in the Philippines. And it was then where I really embraced myself being a Filipino. So not just only learning about other cultures, right, Shelley, but learning about your own and where you
Right.
really came from, right, to really get that appreciation. So it wasn't until then that I really, yeah, I really had a true love for my culture. So learning about yourself, being empathetic was great. Is I think the benefits, and yeah, just growing up with all these different people and backgrounds,
Right.
and then Definitely the negative side to it was when I would come across people, like I said earlier, of my own culture that didn't like that I didn't know the language. And I know I'm not the only one in my own
Right.
culture, but people of other cultures, I know they feel that way as well, being quote unquote American born,
Yeah.
right? And not knowing the language, and how come you don't know the language? And I still get questioned to this day about it,
Yeah.
but I still don't make other people feel that they're indifferent just because, they don't know a certain language.
Right.
So that has always been my purpose, to try to make sure not to have people feel excluded, try to make sure everybody's included in that. So that kind of is a negative part of being around other cultures, is just them just not being educated enough as well, to not knowing other people's cultures also, and just them assuming this is how your group of people is like, and everything. I think just being closed-minded. So
Yeah. Kobe and Clan says, yes, you're on point. We must appreciate our own ethnicity to appreciate others because we can emphasize the love and respect of culture and traditions. And yeah, that is definitely a downfall, again, to the area that I'm in. There are a lot of people who, because they haven't experienced other people, other cultures, even other parts of the country, it's not intentional, but their mind is just very, well, this is how it is. Well, yeah, that's how it is right here. But then there's all of the rest of the world, or the United States, that we need to consider. And I think that happens, no matter where you are. It doesn't just happen here in the Midwest. I mean, there's people on the coast that have no idea what those of us in the Midwest deal with and go through and are like, and we don't have a lot of idea of what it's like on the coasts. And so being able to have that exchange and that open communication, and to be welcoming, and and be okay being uncomfortable, asking some questions, and being uncomfortable being asked some questions, again, like I said before, that are honest, that we just want to have that exchange of information, and not be stupid with our questions, and not be accusatory with our questions, but just to be really like, I'm sorry, but I don't know, this or that about your culture. Can you help me understand it? Or like you said for yourself, I don't know this about my own culture. um, and I think that is a ton of limits that we could all bust through on a very regular basis, is just getting to truly know our neighbors, and not just, oh, that's Michelle that lives across the street, but like, hey, Michelle, your skin is a little different than mine, or you speak a little bit differently than I do, or you seem to have a little bit different traditions than I do. Let's talk about that. Let's, be open and welcoming. I think our world would be an incredibly better place if we did that more frequently and honestly. So let's move into teaching a little bit. So all of these experiences that you have, like, have you found yourself, and you may not know the answer to this, um, doing things to include people from other ethnicities, or all the ethnicities that are represented in your classroom, that maybe you don't see others doing? Does that make sense?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
Um, I know a lot of the lessons, like I bring into my groups, I try to make sure that it's like current events. Like for instance, when there's Martin Luther King Day is coming by, or maybe the month of February highlights, African Americans, and I try to make sure I bring in articles that we are reading, right, about the history of African Americans and everything like that. Or May is Asian Pacific Islander month. I make sure to include that as well, even though majority of the kids in my school are Latinos,
Mhm.
just exposing them to be like, hey, there's other people that you may not
Right.
know about. And even I had there was I have a student that just, it's a struggle to get him to start his work, right? And
Mhm.
when he's with me. And what I did was I thought about, okay, what is something that he likes. And I know he loves soccer. So I was able to find a passage about soccer and actually had a lot of the same experiences as him.
Oh,
Yeah, growing up. And he saw that connection while we were reading it. He was like, hey, that's just like me, So just,
yeah.
and this, the person in the article was from Argentina, when the student, his family's from Mexico. So,
Okay.
so
Right.
that just to have that connection is just kind of like, hey, we're experiencing the same things, even though we're not coming from the same place.
Right.
Yeah. So definitely including those, in your lessons. And that definitely is something I try to make sure I include. I have a wonderful teacher gave me a great idea of every month she would do read alouds of that culture that was representing that month.
Mm.
Yes, and I think that's a great idea that I want to make sure I start implementing also. And so,
Yeah. So we had chatted a little bit again, kind of in preparation for today about what you and I were going to talk about. And so now that we're on to the teaching part of it, what was your experience getting into special education?
oh, yes, so definitely, I think being young, and I loved doing read alouds with my brother, and I
Mhm.
still do that to this day with my kids. And I
That's a
love.
good skill. I mean, that's one of the best ways for little ones, especially, to learn. But at any age.
Definitely, definitely. Whenever I have the opportunity or chance, I kind of slip that in.
Uh-huh.
Read
Yep.
aloud to the students. They loved it. Like after lunch, we would do a read aloud, and just to get the kids get a love of learning, right? Or love of reading, and that there are books out there that they can connect with. But going back to that, I just love doing read alouds with my younger brother, and it kind of, it would make him laugh, the voices like that I would make, and it just gave me more of a love, like, hey, like I like this. I think that kind of sparked it first, and later on, just being able to help other people. I volunteered when I was in high school, volunteered to teach in a sixth grade classroom. And then there's so many different things. And then also having my foster sister, and then not really sure, okay, do I want to do general ed or do I want to do special ed? That has always been on my mind. And then when I finally got into college here and I was doing the deaf studies program, and I kind of shifted to have an emphasis in special ed with my major, I got a position working in an elementary school, upper grade, fifth grade classroom. And I was under the most greatest teacher to this day. I learned from the best. I definitely still learning, but she has taught me so much of how to even be like in the classroom. She wouldn't take no for an answer, as in like she would ask me, okay, what do you want the kids to call you? And I was like, oh no, it's okay. They can just call me like Miss M or something, or Miss
Yeah.
S. And then she was just like, no, the kids will learn your name. They will learn how to say it. And my maiden name,
Wow.
yeah, my maiden name is Sagusho, and it is nothing. It's not how it's spelled at all. So, and such a huge tongue twister. But no, at the kids learned how to say it, and she made
Mhm.
sure of that. If the kids can say Tyrannosaurus Rex, Shelley,
True. True. Yeah, that's
they
true.
can learn. They can learn how to
Yeah.
say certain things. So I definitely took that with me up until today. I made sure that they learned how to pronounce certain things. But that the experience of doing that, working in a gen ed classroom for a few years, and then the need for special ed was high at that time back in 2000. I'm not sure, 2006 or so, and it still is. But at that time, I knew, I was like, I something about special ed. I want to see if it's something that I really do want to get into. So I actually was employed with a fantastic outside agency of being a one-on-one behavior therapist.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, with an outside agency, and had the best training. It was really good, and learning so much in that realm. And I had students. I was a one-on-one with students with cerebral palsy, who are physically disabled in a wheelchair, to autism, and then one being fully included, and she had Down syndrome, you know, and it was I had fun. It was great. It was great. It was a learning experience. And that was my door that opened to not just education, but yeah, just being in the education field with students with special needs. Because all my experience before was, the adult, them
Right.
being adults and yeah, community based learning and stuff like that back then growing up. But being in the school system and elementary kids, definitely that was the door that opened for me. So after that, volunteering and I got into my school district's district intern program. Very, very fortunate to get into that. And having the experience I had, I was able to be hired on at my first school, which is down in the LA area. And it was great. It was a good learning experience. But I remember my very first day, Shelley, my principal, took me to my room, and it's just like, okay, here you go. Here you go. And I was like, oh my God, everything kind of sank in right there, right?
Right.
Like, oh my gosh, like I am responsible for these babies, and it was a
Yeah.
position. It was a position in kinder through second grade, mild, moderate, special day class. And it's just like, okay, here you go. And I'm like, and the training we had, Shelley, was a 6-week orientation for that intern program. And it was, here you go. I was terrified.
Oh my goodness.
I was terrified. Yeah. And like all that experience I had just went out the door, It was gone. But I'm so fortunate from doing all those positions that I made relationships with teachers and paraprofessionals that was in the game for a long time that helped me with resources and everything to get my program going. And even the team that I worked with, the Gen Ed team that I was there with and still friends with today, just took my hand and just helped me out with resources and materials also. But it was scary, difficult, and I feel so bad for that first group that I had. They're already graduated high school now, Shelley. So crazy.
Well, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm guessing when you walked into that first classroom, so your background today is very clean and very non-decorated. And then there's my background.
Oh.
So I'm going to guess that your first classroom, when you first walked in there, was more like your background is today, where there wasn't anything on the walls, where there wasn't, this beautiful setup of classroom. But within a few days, yours was more like my background, where there was stuff on the walls. There was, you were finding those resources, you were doing all the stuff. But I think sometimes we do a disservice to our new teachers. And if I am remembering correctly, this is the group of people that you are really working with as far as helping them, those new teachers in special education, is kind of understanding all of that stuff. Like when you walk in, there's not going to be a lot for you to use. You're going to have to go find. You're going to have to spend money. You're going to have to do this and this and this. Am I correct in that?
Exactly. Hit it on the nose, Shelley. And and exactly, you said, even you just saying, we have to spend money, right? I remember, I don't know if you saw the meme where it says there's a picture of the government.
Yeah.
And then the teacher funded classroom.
Yeah.
And some of my family members asked me, like, you don't get compensated for any of this stuff? Do we, Shelley?
Most places do not. Now, there are some places, that they give you maybe a stipend. I think the most I ever received in a stipend was a couple $100s. And that was gone in like the first purchase.
Exactly.
And then, the rest of the year and the rest of the decorations. And even today, like I haven't been in the classroom for 5 years. And so I still have a lot of my stuff because I'm like, well, what if I go back in the classroom? I don't want to have to repurchase all this stuff. So I've held on to it, but I'm like, I really need to get rid of this because I'm probably not going to go into the classroom. But yeah, it's just like the amount of money that I spent over my teaching career, I'm having a hard time just donating that all now because it's like, oh my gosh, that was like probably 2 or 3 paychecks, if not, more over the course of my career.
Yes. That's probably why I
And
still have stuff too. That makes sense. I'm like, oh, I can't. Yeah, that's true. It's true. Yeah.
yeah. So tell us, we have about 5 or 6 minutes before we're going to have to wrap up. So tell us about stepping into SPED.
Yes. Yes, I'm starting a new podcast, hopefully launching July 25th. And it is called Stepping into Special Education. And so, what it is I'll be helping new special education teachers thrive through self growth, the internal work, and then also professionally as well. The quick classroom organization that's functional, you know,
Mhm.
doesn't have to be pretty, but something that is
Right.
functional, something that they can do quick right away. And then also having the community building, which is having the relationships with, that's
Yeah.
what we do in the Master IEP Coach, making sure that everybody feels included in the IEP table. But just having relationships, how to work well with your paraprofessional, how to gain relationships with your students, the parents, and then also communicating with the outside services, right? Which is like the
Mhm.
school psychologist or the speech and language. There's so many adults involved, Shelley, right? It
Yes.
we
Yeah.
do. And coordinating all of that, but then just also just making sure that that you have that good relationship with everybody, and everybody, especially your paraprofessionals. I remember I had up to 4 in my room one time with a class of only 10 students.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like, how do you manage it all?
Exactly. When you're not really their boss, but you kind of are. Yeah.
Right, right. And so that's who I would love to work with, even more new special education teachers that just don't know where to start, don't know where to go, not really sure how to work with the paraprofessionals or parents. That is what I'm hoping with this podcast, and helping them just getting those quick wins to set up their classroom, having interviews with school psychologists and other fellow teachers, even parents, having bringing parents in to let special education teachers know the everyday life that we are blessed with these babies for what, 6-7 hours at a time, but they go home to parents for the rest of their lives.
Yep.
We're only with them for a fraction of the time,
Yeah.
so sometimes we forget about that, right? That
Mhm.
and the we forget of how hard, how difficult it can be for the parents. So, definitely bringing on parents is definitely one of my main things I want to do as well. Just having their background story and letting educators know, what it's like. So that is my hopes for this podcast, and definitely you're an inspiration too, Shelley,
Oh, thank you.
for
Well,
this.
and to your point, I mean, I had some students that I had for, gosh, 7, 8, 9, and 10 years. I had 4 different students that I had in for those amount of years, and then the rest of my students, like you said, I had for 2 to 4 years, depending, because I had in the building where I taught the longest, K through 8 of the most severe in that school district, and then K through 4 of just the kiddos who just needed the extra little bit of outside help from their general education classroom. So my ones that I had that were the most severe, I had one student for 10 years, the day I walked into that district until the day I walked out of that district. And she walked in and walked out the same time I did. So but because of that experience, I thought I had a pretty good idea of what it was like. And then I wrote my book and I did my interviews of these families, and I was blown away at how much more there is to their lives, and how much more I appreciate their lives now than I even did before. And so I'm forever grateful to the families that let me write about them and those who can't teach, because it shows a completely different aspect and perspective to teachers that we don't have. And it's, I think, very vital that we understand that, because like you said, we just have them for a few hours a day. We don't have them all summer. Oftentimes they go to a different teacher the next year, certainly in special, I mean, in general education, sometimes even in special education that happens too. And so it is important for us to know what's going on at home. How can we cooperate and collaborate so that we can make things at home very similar to what's happening at school?
Yes. Yes, that is number one. Because yeah, Shelley, just having yeah, we want the child to be structured a certain way, here. Thank you, Karina. Um and
That's good. You have support today
yes, I
and
do. I'm
always.
so lucky. Yes. And it's so difficult, right, Shelley, to have the same structure of what we're doing here at school and then what we're doing at home. That's probably like the most difficult. Um, and I think for myself, for sure, because of the background of the parents that I have, a lot of them, they they're working two plus jobs
Yeah.
sometimes. It is so difficult for them. And then we got language barriers too, so there's definitely so many limitations to that. But whatever we can do, provide like schedules, visual schedules, at least try to have that conversation with the parent, so okay, what is the structure at home, so you can at least create that for the child at school, and then they can go ahead and just take that home. I did that a lot during pandemic time, when just having that connection and that follow through, which was difficult for parents at home, but they were great. Yeah.
Yeah. And wait, that's another thing I think we have to remember. We're burdened as teachers, most definitely. But parents are burdened too. And we've asked for the burden that we have because we went to school, we wanted to be a teacher, we got that degree, we went out and found the job, and that's where we are because we've chosen to be there. But most parents haven't chosen to have a child with a disability. There are those situations where someone has adopted somebody, or, a foster situation, whatever, but the majority of parents have not asked for the situation that they're in.
Hmm.
And so we need to remember that, that they have a lot of insight. B, they have their own struggles, they have their own burdens, and we need to be respectful both both ways. That the teachers have burdens, and we're trying to figure things out, and the parents have burdens, and if we can work together and say, okay, how can we walk this out together, and not be defensive when the other one has an idea that is different than ours,
Hmm.
and say, okay, I don't really agree with that idea, but tell me more about it, and maybe I can understand why you're asking for that, or maybe I can understand what you're saying when you're saying this, that I didn't get it just by the words that you said, hey, let's do this. um, because again, I think, and I know I said this earlier, but it's so important to have that open communication and that collaboration. With a special needs son with ASD, love the insight and background at school, so we as parents can be on the same page for support for our kids all around. Because yeah, what is, you know, and this was something that I didn't emphasize as much before getting into the Master IEP Coach mentorship, but what is the purpose of special education? The purpose of an IEP is to prepare a child for further education, employment, and independent living. So, in order to do all of those things, there's a lot we need to do or can be doing that maybe we haven't been doing to this point. And I don't mean every single special ed teacher out there, every single gen ed teacher out there, but you know, I think they are the exceptions
Right.
rather than the rule.
Yes, exactly, Shelley. And you just talking about, making sure that pretty much everybody's on the same page, right? And how my cousin Jane did say, my nephew does have autism, and I know she, just like you said, we chose this, and a lot of our parents, they didn't. And so we're assuming, we've been to so many meetings and so many IEPs, that this is, I don't want to say the norm, but we get kind of jaded, right? Because we've been doing this
Yes.
for so long that
Right.
we forget that our parents, this is their first time they actually had to sit in an IEP meeting. They don't
Right.
know what to expect. Do they even
Right.
know their rights?
Right. Exactly.
And we forget about that. So um I try to make sure that we communicate with the parents and kind of give them a heads up. Okay, this is what we're talking about, and the things that we learn at Master IEP Coach to help support the parent, I think, is so important to making sure that parent input statement is there, right?
Mhm.
It's such a big deal. And what was I going to say? Oh, also, I was going to take it back to making sure that parents don't get so defensive, because I know I've had parents that didn't have a good experience with the schools that they've had in the past. So they kind of bring that with them right to this new school when they come to me.
Right.
And so I try to make sure when I do meet with them the first time, or when we do have those parent conferences or like back to school night, I try to make sure and emphasize that, just letting you know that, just as long as all of us support each other, we communicate as much as we can, moms, dads, grandpa, grandma, guardians, foster parents, just as long as we communicate with each other, at the end of the day, it's the child that we are supporting. And with me doing this for now going to be 14 years, that is when I see the child become successful.
Yes.
Right? When everybody is on the same page, whether the child likes it or not, they know they can't get away with stuff at home and at school.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Right? I have seen them skyrocket. And it's so beautiful to see, because we've had them for so long. We have them for how many years?
Yeah.
But that huge growth is great. So yeah.
Yeah. And definitely when it comes to, and we've gone over a little bit, so I'm going to wrap up here, I promise. But definitely when it comes to behaviors, unwanted behaviors, if you can get everybody on the same page, exactly what you said, it's not quite the same with academics. It does work, but when it has to do with behaviors, most definitely, when they know, okay, no matter where I go, the same standards are going to be applied and the same levels of discipline are going to be applied. It can change so much so quickly, and that was the love that I eventually fell into, was the behavior side of things, because of experiences that I had. But definitely when you can be collaborative, and when you can remember, everybody's going through a tough time, kind of is the basic, whether you're the parent, whether you're the teacher, and certainly if you're the student, no student asks or wants to be a person who's struggling in school. And I think that's something we really, really forget the most often, is that here's this child just trying to be like everybody else. And for whatever reason, it's not working out that way for them. And I asked the question in my Facebook group recently, who's the most important person in the IEP writing process? And most of my answers were correct, in my opinion. My opinion is it's the student.
Yes.
Because why else are we there? We wouldn't be writing an IEP if it wasn't for the student. Mm-hmm. So we have to remember, put our pride aside. It's not about what I want. It's not about what the parent wants. It's not about what the school wants or what's easiest for all the adults. It's all about the kid that the IEP is being written towards. So
Exactly.
So final words, Michelle. I really need to let you go. So
no, I love it. This is good. No, just wrapping it all up. Try to immerse yourself in different cultures, even just, learn something new, or read a book, or do a read aloud with your children of a different culture, just speaking to both parents and teachers, actually, doing that, just getting everybody exposed, I think is so important. Just learning about other cultures is so important. And with the special education part, my podcast will be launching July 25th. So hopefully, definitely the support would be great, and just trying to figure it all out. Shelley, you need to give me pointers. I'll be calling you. So.
Oh, absolutely. I'll do what I can. I'm eventually wanting to put this out as a podcast too. My daughter's supposed to be helping me with all of that, because I'm too old to get all the tech, but she's a recent college graduate, so she understands all of that stuff. But how can people find you? Like, how can these new teachers, do you have a website that you work one-on-one with them, or is it just mostly going to be through Stepping into Special Education podcast?
Yeah, for right now, it's you can connect with me on Instagram, Stepping into Special Ed, and I also have a Facebook business page as well. So definitely that would be the first step to connect with me. And then also you can contact me at steppingintоспecialed@gmail.com.
Okay, perfect. And I will try to put all of those things in the comment section so that people can use those and access those. Michelle, it's been so wonderful to get to know you today. Thank you. I'm disappointed that I don't get to meet you in person in a few weeks, but I understand how that all goes. And for everybody else, next week is July 4th week, and I am on vacation, so there will not be a hashtag no limits. But when I come back on July 12th, I will have the autism dad, also known as Rob Gorski. He will be joining me, so you want to tune in for that. So thanks, everybody. Have a great week, and happy Independence Day.
Thanks, guys.